Okay, this is the speech which we have come to refer to as the Claudius is a bastard speech, and it is true, I believe, that you can tell from his use of internal rhymes and caesuras. I also think it's a speech that's very likely to come up. You'll see that in this PowerPoint I've included not only Will Jonas's piece entitled Claudius is a Bastard, but also a note from the great Harold Jenkins, which views with smart suspicion the rhetorical flourish and smoothness with which the king furnishes the speech. Fun fact, by the way, Claudius is never called Claudius in any dialogue. You can go through the whole play and not know that he's called Claudius. And in Q2, this little bit here is the only time he's ever called it. And there it is. Now, first of all, a remark about the structure of the speech. You'll notice that it kind of jackknifes on one of his very brusque caesuras, for all our thanks. Look at the placing of those. I know it seems an odd place to start in the middle, but that is, I would suggest for Claudius, a kind of marking point, a kind of full stop, a four-syllable full stop, much like we have here it, and so much for him. And it is one which I believe separates his personal life from the political life that he is now to conduct as a king. You'll notice, of course, that personal life is also highly political, with this very telling phrase, the imperial jointress to this warlike state. Those loaded words. Our sometime sister, now our queen, sometime meaning formerly. Here, as elsewhere, the king has absolutely no shame in eliding her awkward family role with her new nuptial position. And those words, the imperial jointress, do the same. She's a jointress because she shares in his responsibilities, and those responsibilities are imperial. They affect the state. Now, let's look at the way he talks about that personal life, because it is personal, and I would suggest perhaps what the audience wants to hear. Look at that fourth word even, Hamlet, our dear brother. That is the Hamlet we've met. We've actually met old Hamlet, and again we are faced with that struggle between the past and the present. The king, however, you can tell, is much more interested in the present and the future than he is in the past. And that past bit is put in what we call a concessive clause. Although this is true, nonetheless, the main thing is even more important. Now, admittedly, for the king, that concessive clause has to be really quite long. And in fact, the main clause happens here in 184 to 5. Let's look at that concessive clause though. The yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green, and that it is befitted to bear our hearts in grief, although we ought to look as though we're sad about it, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one front of her, yada yada yada, play the protocol, absolutely do the right thing. Yet, and that dismisses the concessive clause, we've actually had to get over it. Bear in mind, this is a Claudius who will shortly say to Hamlet that father lost his, open square brackets, father, that he's not a sentimental man, and we can tell it from his caesuras. And I would call this bit here, is for all our thanks, I would consider it a kind of uber caesura, one that breaks not only the line, but the speech. Again though, he takes head on, and with a kind of disgust on which Hamlet later picks up, the relentless clash between mirth in funeral and that internal rhyme there with dirge in marriage. And the effrontery of what you could almost call an oxymoron, a mirthful funeral and dirge in marriage, that death-like tread with which people would follow a hearse rather than a happy couple, is played up by the internal rhyme. And also there's an implicit caesura there before the conjunction as well, so that we've got that idea there. And again picked up in the del-ite and dole, that very slight vowel shift, what you might call, well, it's actually called assonance, because the internal bit of the syllable is the bit that shifts, whereas the consonants on the outside stay the same. And what that does, like alliteration often does, is to connect two very disparate ideas and take it to wife. Nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms. Again, a nod there to the idea of an elective monarchy, people who have, in a way, to consent with these actions. Now, Harold Jenkins makes a smart point, as ever, that one mechanism, one linguistic trick that the king pulls in order to secure that consent is the repeated use of the first person plural, which we can know as the royal we, but can, without us particularly noticing, elide into a we that could include him and Gertrude, or it could include the whole state. If you look at it from the end, for example, he sends Cornelius and Voltimand on a mission and says, "We doubt it nothing, heartily farewell," as if we, the state, rely upon your mission. Here, however, the we is the interested party. We, with wiser sorrow, think on him, might be an injunction to the court to remember old Hamlet, but have we, as 'twere the defeated joy taken to wife, is a distinctly personal one. I mean, you could almost say that she is the wife of the state, and we are all the state. Now, that, so much for that, that is the front end of the speech. Now follows that you, second person plural, no. Again, the way of recapping. The fact that Shakespeare doesn't flinch from the fact that this is expository suggests that we in the audience and the on-stage audience of the courtiers are being included in this sharing of the information. Bear in mind that actually, as members of the audience, we actually do already know this. The king is now involving us further in the events of the past, the idea of young Fortinbras and his own revenge plot. But he's joining us in with a kind of update, a kind of live stream. And the update we have is that he has here writ to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, so Norway as in the King of Norway. It looks as though the King of Norway cannot control this renegade, this sharking up of lands out of revenge, but they have to put some kind of barrier on him. And we, the state, the king, both, here dispatch you, good Cornelius, and you, Voltimand, for bearers of this greeting to old Norway. Again, that personification of a whole state, that metonymy, using a person to represent it, and enjoining them to conduct this business. It's worth noting before we leave it, though, just how extraordinarily controlling he is, not only of his own speech, but also of the actions of others, giving to you no further personal power to business with the king, more than the scope of these delated articles allow. You can only say what I have told you to say, stick to the script, otherwise I will find out about it. So we can see here a man whose control of his unctuous, oleaginous, smarmy rhetoric is kept in check, not only by the caesuras, but by the way he controls speech and the actions of others.